Is it okay to leave a job off of your resume? Well, this is probably one of the most common questions that I get from people who are resume writing, and it causes them
Okay.
a lot of stress that they may have had a job in their background that they wish that they could take back. They don't want to put on their resume. So I want to give you some actionable advice in this video on how to address those scenarios, because let's face it, pretty much every one of us has taken a position or had some hiccup in our past that we don't want haunting us for the rest of our career like some sort of scarlet letter. But before we get into that, if you're interested,
This reminds me of the Concord game. Concord was a game that was going to be like the crown jewel for Sony. It was released like 2 months ago. It was supposed to be one of the best shooters out there, but it turns out that the game sucked, the characters sucked, the story sucked, everyone hated the game. At its peak, the game had 70 people online playing. So that is nothing for a AAA game that took 8 years to develop and had a budget of about $400 million. Of course, different sources have different numbers, but people were joking about the artists, the developers, the game designers, the everyone that worked on that game, because, well, what are you going to do after that project? It's not like you can leave that job out of your resume because, well, it was 8 years of your life. So people are going to ask you, well, what have you been doing up until this point? What have you been doing the past 8 years? So it's not like they can't take it off their resume, but at the same time, it is something that many people are going to wonder, well, this guy worked on that game that it made the company lose a ton of money, so
in more career-related content just like this directly from a corporate recruiter, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You may also want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. So maybe you took a job that you thought was going to be great, but it ended up turning into a nightmare and it's starting to ruin your resume as a result. Or maybe you accepted a position with an industry lagger or a company that had a really bad reputation, and suddenly you find yourself with having to do some explaining that you really don't want to do in an interview. Or maybe you took a job as a stopgap and you knew you weren't going to be there very long, and another job came along that was actually better and you left, and now you've got this short-term assignment and you're wondering what to do with it. And I know there's a lot of people stressing out about these scenarios, and it's really tempting to consider taking a short-term assignment or a job that you're not so proud of off of your resume. But then there's this fear of what happens if an employer finds out, will I get in trouble? But I want you to keep in mind something here. Your resume is your career billboard, and there's no rule that says that you have to put everything you've ever accomplished or every job you've ever taken on it.
Exactly. Remember that it is Remember that it is your resume. It is your decision. It is your decision to put a job there, to not put a job there, to say that you have certain certificates or not. It is entirely up to you. So there is no rule or guideline or law, as far as I know, in any country that says that you have to put everything that you have done up until this point. It is entirely up to you. And to be completely honest, there are many job postings or jobs that many companies have on their websites that say that you're going to have to do this and this and that, and at the end of the day, when you get the job, you find out that you're gonna have to do a ton of different things that were not part of the initial job description. So just like job descriptions that have a ton of different responsibilities, and they give you even more responsibilities, this is your resume. You have the power to decide what you are going to put there.
You can be selective with how you present yourself to the employer. And it's the same thing that most every company does. For example, if you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard go by from a soft drink company, that billboard's probably going to say all the wonderful benefits, and it's going to show people enjoying it, saying crisp, cool, and refreshing. But they're not going to tell you about all the negative aspects of it, that it's loaded with sugar, that it potentially would give you diabetes if you have too much of it. The same thing goes with our resume. Now, hopefully we don't have any negative components that we really need to hide, But if we want to put our best foot forward, we're going to show our career in the most positive light. So that means we're going to be selective with how we present ourselves to the employer. Now, there's going to be somebody out there saying, well, if you don't put everything on your resume, then an employer might flag that in a background check, and that could cause all kinds of problems downstream. I would say yes and no. You have to keep in mind an important distinction here. It's the application is different than the resume.
Yeah.
The application is what you fill out when you apply for the position. You go over to the company website, you fill out a whole bunch of stuff, and then you'll upload a resume as part of the application. The resume is what gets sent off to the hiring manager and to the interview teams, but the application oftentimes does not follow suit. It usually just stays inside of the applicant tracking system, and that's what they use for the background checks. So if you're going to create an application, that's where I would be as accurate as I can to just to make sure that there's no issues popping up further down the line.
Yes, I wouldn't suggest to lie on the application itself, because just like he said, this is used for many different purposes, like to make sure that you are in a certain country or in a certain area, or for background checks. So I wouldn't lie in a job application. At the end of the day, it's again entirely up to you, but I don't believe it is a good idea. The resume is completely different. It is yours. You can do whatever you want with it.
But if there's a discrepancy, I guess just be prepared to discuss it. But we're going to talk about some scenarios here on why your resume may look a little different than your application. The first scenario might be, suppose you took a job that was just very short-term assignment. It ended up being an unmitigated disaster, and you only were there for 3 months. That job's probably not going to help you very much for the most part because you weren't there long enough to impact the bottom line of the business. You probably honestly didn't even get fully trained up in the role if you left that short term. And by putting it on your resume, it could cause more problems than it's worth, because the last thing we want to do is be in a defensive posture when we're in an interview where they're challenging, why did you leave this job so quickly? So depending on the role, I may just opt to leave the very short-term assignment off so long as it doesn't cause any other problems in our resume. And the second scenario might be,
the problem with jobs on which you were there for a very short amount of time is that managers or hiring managers or the HR people see it as a red flag, because they might think that you're going to do the same there. And it is not profitable for a company to hire someone, train the person, and invest not a ton of money, but invest money on the person with you usually, when hire someone, you have to give that person a laptop or a cell phone. Maybe you have to pay some bills for that, depending on the laws of the country. So it is not profitable for a company to hire someone and then he just quits after 2 months. So it is a red flag. It's not like you're going to be discarded right away. You may still get the interview, but people are going to ask you about that. They are going to ask you, well, you were in this job for just like 2 months. Why would you not do the same thing here? So if you are already a seasoned developer or a worker in any area, and you already have a ton of other things to put in your resume, just leave the temporary assignments out of your resume. It's not worth the problems.
Related, where you had a long-term position before, maybe you got laid off or you left the organization and you needed to take a temporary or contract position just for a very short amount of time, and then you're resuming your career. So it's kind of like this little blip on your resume that's a little kind of just stands out. That might be another scenario where I would just remove the position from my resume, because again, it's not helping you. It's just a filler job. And then the same thing goes with another scenario of you took a job that was completely unrelated. Like one of these things is not like the other. Like you're working as an engineer, then suddenly you're selling insurance, and then you're back to being an engineer again.
I remember that many years ago, we were planning to interview a developer, and in his resume, he had something like champion of the League of Legends tournament in my college. That was funny, and since my colleagues know that I play League of Legends, they asked me, is this like super difficult? Why is he mentioning that here? And I told them, well, I don't know. And it was a position for for a software engineering job. So it was odd that he was listing that he was the champion of a local tournament of League of Legends. Yes, it is impressive when you have a hobby and you are like at the very top of it. If you have a resume and in small sections you say something like, well, I climbed the Mount Everest when I was 15 years old, well, that's impressive. That talks about your tenacity and your leadership and your willingness to do something that is very difficult. But it's not going to contribute that much if it isn't like related to the job position. So yeah.
In that case, the job that's completely unrelated from the rest of your career, I probably would opt to remove that as well, so long as it doesn't cause problems. Now, obviously, if you were working in this other unrelated job for 10 years and then you came back into your original career type, then you probably want to include it because you're going to have a huge gap. So make sure that whenever you decide to remove a position from your resume, that it's not creating other problems downstream, like creating abnormally long job gaps. And another possibility.
Yes, then again, the Concord developers and artists, how are they going to explain the 8-year-long gap? It's going to be a difficult question to answer.
Might be is if you had a position that was relatively short term and it represented reverse mobility for you. So you were at a certain level and you took this other job because maybe you got laid off and you had to solve for getting back to work as quickly as you could. And you took a job at a slightly lower level, which showed reverse mobility. That might be a scenario where I would remove that position as well, because it could confuse hiring teams wondering if your career is going in reverse. So use your judgment there again.
I didn't know that term, reverse mobility. It's interesting. And that's why I like this guy's videos, because he's an HR expert, so he knows what he's talking about. I know the concepts, but I don't know the technical terms. So yes, what he's saying is entirely true. If you are in a senior level position and you take a junior level position in another company, well, that might make people wonder, well, I don't know if I can give him a senior level position or a junior level position. Maybe he took a junior level position because the previous manager didn't think he was qualified. So be careful with that.
And if that position doesn't create a huge job gap for you, I would say how I would define a job gap is maybe anything longer than 6 months, maybe even slightly longer than that. But anything longer than 6 months, maybe I would opt to keep the job in. It's just, there's so many different what ifs, but in general, just use your judgment. And if the solution by leaving the job off creates more problems for you than it's worth, then that's probably a good litmus test to leave the job on your resume. And for me, I usually go back between 10 to 12 years of relevant experience. So anything that happened before that, I will often just consolidate and say other relevant experience, and I'll just list out the employers and not necessarily put the dates. So in that case, if it's a job that you had a long time ago, it might actually just fall into that category. Or if it was really early in your career and it was over a decade ago, I might just opt to leave that off my resume altogether. But you have to keep in mind that most positions require 7 to 10 years of experience, tops, maybe up to 15 if it's a senior, very senior director plus role. So in general, you can leave a lot of that older experience off your resume, especially if it's causing you some problems. And thinking like ageism, for example, we have to keep in mind our goal here is to be the best possible fit for the jobs that we're applying to. And our resume is our career billboard. It's our
ageism. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a real thing. I remember that there was a movie called Corporate Man or something like that, and there was this guy that got fired from his job. He was very senior, veteran. He was like 60 years old, something like that. And in his resume, he added stuff like I was in the military, I participated in this assignment and all of that. And the HR person that was taking a look at his resume, she was an advisor, and she told him, leave the ancient stuff out of your resume. And that is completely true. Sometimes if you have already been in the job market for a very long time, sometimes people are not going to want to hire you because maybe you're going to quit very soon because you want to retire, or maybe you will demand a very high salary. So be careful with what you put in your resume. Again, it's you don't have to put this the story of your life there.
Our main marketing component, and so we want to make sure that it's showing a clear and concise fit, highlighting the most important benefits, the cool, crisp, refreshing, and minimizing any of the potential negativity that might come about. Now, if you're somebody that's struggling in your resume writing, that's actually something that I specialize in. I actually have a website called alifeafterlayoff.com, which is loaded with insider tips and tricks directly from a corporate recruiter on how people get jobs, how recruiters recruit, and it demystifies a lot of those processes. So I would encourage you to go and check that out. And I created a course called Resume Rocket Fuel, which is a very detailed look at how to write your resume from a recruiter's perspective. And so I break down exactly how to write a resume step by step, line by line, and teach you exactly what recruiters are looking for in order to give you the best chance at writing a targeted document that will get you into the interview process. And I actually write my own resume side by side with you, and I show you exactly what to do, and I demystify a lot of these steps and help you troubleshoot potential pain points. And it also includes a resume template to get you started. So if you're really struggling on your resume, I encourage you to check out Resume Rocket Fuel. It's the most robust course on the market, and it's going to give you everything you'll ever need. And it's a core career skill that everybody should learn. So anyway, hopefully this helps demystify the resume writing process just a little bit for you. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you on.
This was a great video. It talked about many important things, and yes, just like he said at the very beginning, it is entirely up to you what you put on your resume or not. You don't have to add every single embarrassing thing that you did in your entire life. You don't have to talk about all of your hobbies and the Netflix shows that you watch. Make sure that you know every single detail of your resume. You need to be ready to explain everything. If you left a job after 2 months, make sure to have a good answer for a question like, well, why did you leave this job after 2 months? Are you going to do the same thing here? I can keep talking for like 10 minutes about resume building, but I believe this is enough for today. I hope you guys liked this video. If you liked it, make sure to like the video and subscribe. I'm trying to reach 50 subscribers, so help me if you want. Thank you, and see you the next time.